Bismarck, March 3, 1943, 0600 hours. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura stands on the bridge of his flagship, overseeing the resupply convoy. 8 destroyers escort 8 transport ships, each fully loaded, through waters that Japanese doctrine considers part of the empire. On board are the 6,900 soldiers of the 51st Division, reinforcements urgently awaited by Lieutenant General Hatazo Adachi at La Kimura has every reason to expect their safe arrival. Japanese warships have navigated these seas for over a year without serious interference from American surface forces. What he cannot know, and what no officer in the Imperial Navy could even imagine, is that American engineers in Australia have converted ordinary medium bombers into instruments of destruction that will turn these waters into a massacre. Within 4 hours, B-25 Mitchells, modified with .50 caliber machine guns protruding from their noses like mechanical fangs, will tear his convoy apart, leaving burning wreckage scattered across the Bismarck Sea. The Japanese Navy's confidence is rooted in experience, victories at Pearl Harbor and the Java Sea, the perceived ineffectiveness of high-altitude American bombers, and the belief that destroyers' anti-aircraft guns can repel any low-flying attackers. Captain Tamikihara, commanding the destroyer Shergar, knows these waters well from repeated voyages between Rabaul and Lamb. He has seen the Americans attempt everything: high-altitude bombing from B-17s that rarely hit, torpedo attacks requiring long, predictable runs, and medium-altitude bombing that allows ships to evade bombs. To counter such threats, the Imperial Navy relies on rapid evasive maneuvers, concentrated anti-aircraft fire from multiple ships, and fighter cover provided by the 11th Air Fleet base at Rabaul. These tactics have succeeded often enough that Admiral Junichi Makawa sanctioned the convoy, despite knowing it would be detected by the Americans. Japanese officers view air combat as a confrontation between ships and horizontal bombers or torpedo planes, encounters where disciplined gunnery and precise maneuvers can defeat most attacks. Commander Yasumi Doi, aboard the destroyer Tokidik, has rigorously trained his gun crews to lead targets with their 25mm cannons and maintain continuous fire even under assault. The convoy's defenses include over 125mm guns, numerous 13mm machine guns, and the destroyer's 5-inch dual-purpose guns, a protective umbrella of steel over the transports. These measures have successfully repelled American attacks before, reinforcing Japanese confidence. Beyond troops, the transports carry critical supplies: ammunition, medical materials, food, and equipment essential for the Japanese forces at La. The largest, Kembaru, displaces more than 6,000 tons and carries a full regiment of the 51st Division, men who have waited at Rabaul for weeks for conditions to sail. Each ship is carefully loaded to balance troop numbers with essential supplies. The soldiers know they are entering a combat zone, yet Japanese naval superiority should safeguard them on the short voyage to La. The convoy maintains strict formation, destroyers shielding the transports and ready for submarine or aerial threats, following procedures honed over 2 years of Pacific warfare. What sets March 3, 1943 apart is not immediately visible. Lieutenant Commander Ikeda, aboard Asahiya, reports multiple contacts at medium altitude, an American bombing formation, a B-17s, and B-25s at about 7,000 feet. The convoy's crews recognize it as a standard attack and prepare their anti-aircraft guns, calculating deflection and altitude, ready to unleash the protective curtain that has preserved so many convoys. But the crews cannot yet see the other planes. B-25 Mitchells flying at wave-top level, modified in ways beyond Japanese imagination. The transformation of B-25s into strafing gunships marks one of the most significant tactical innovations of the Pacific War. Frustrated by the ineffectiveness of conventional bombing against moving ships, Major Paul Irving Gunn, nicknamed Pappy, a former Navy pilot turned officer in the Army Air Forces, understood that hitting ships from high altitude was nearly impossible. Torpedo attacks required specialized training and equipment that the Army Air Forces simply did not have in the Southwest Pacific. Collaborating with North American Aviation Field Representative Jack Fox at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane, Australia, Gunn began fitting additional .50 caliber machine guns into the noses of B-25 bombers, removing the bombardier's position to create room for 4 guns at first, later expanding to 8 in subsequent modifications. These alterations demanded extensive reinforcement of the aircraft structure, extra ammunition storage, and careful attention to weight distribution to maintain balance. A set of challenges Gunn and his mechanics overcame through meticulous trial and error. The .50 caliber guns were loaded with M8 armor-piercing incendiary rounds, 619-grain projectiles traveling at 2,910 feet per second, capable of penetrating destroyer deck armor and igniting fires. Each gun fired up to 850 rounds per minute, meaning 8 guns unleashed 6,800 rounds per minute, a torrent of destruction able to slice through ship superstructures, neutralize anti-aircraft positions, and kill exposed crew members before they could respond. The psychological impact of facing such firepower was as devastating as the physical damage. Japanese sailors who survived these attacks would later recall the terror of seeing AB-25's nose blaze with muzzle flashes, knowing hundreds of armor-piercing rounds were about to tear through their vessel. The development of skip bombing tactics complemented these strafing modifications perfectly. B-25s could now attack from medium altitude while delivering bombs with deadly precision. Major William Benn of the 43rd Bombardment Group had pioneered the method with B-17s, discovering that bombs released 200 to 250 feet above the water would skip like stones, striking ship sides or exploding close enough to inflict fatal damage. The technique required exact timing and immense courage, as pilots had to fly straight and level toward their targets at low altitude, exposing themselves to enemy anti-aircraft fire. Accuracy, however, was revolutionary. Crews practiced relentlessly, honing their skills on the wreck of SS Perth on a reef near Port Moresby, learning to judge distances, speed, and release points until bombs consistently struck their targets. General George Kenney, commanding the 5th Air Force, recognized potential of pairing the B-25's 8-gun strafer modifications with skip bombing, envisioning a new class of commerce destroyers capable of annihilating Japanese shipping. By March 1943, the 3rd Attack Group had fully converted to the strafer configuration. The 90th Bombardment Squadron, under Major Edward Lehner, led the way in developing attack tactics to exploit the 8-gun nose to maximum effect. Standard procedure called for B-25 to approach at 1,000 to 1,500 feet, then drop to wave top height roughly 2 miles from the target, accelerating to maximum speed while aligning with the ship. At 1,500 yards, pilots opened fire with all 8 nose guns, spraying armor-piercing incendiary rounds while continuing toward the target for skip bombing. Admiral Kimura's first warning that something unprecedented was imminent came as the B-17s at 7,000 feet began their runs, drawing the attention of every Japanese anti-aircraft gun in the convoy. The destroyer crews performed flawlessly, unleashing an impressive barrage of 25mm and 5-inch fire, tracers weaving deadly patterns across the sky. But this was precisely the plan the Americans had anticipated. While all eyes tracked the high-altitude bombers, 13 Royal Australian Air Force Boomerang fighters and 12 B-25 Mitchell strafers of the 3rd Attack Group approached at wave-top height from the southwest, so low that their propeller wash whipped spray off the ocean surface. Major Edward Lehner led the assault in his Mitchell, nicknamed Ruthless. Closing in on the destroyer Shiryuki at 280 miles per hour, he saw the Japanese sailors on deck pointing in disbelief. They had seen B-25s before, but never like this. Never with 8 black openings in the nose, guns jetting forward like accusatory fingers, and never at an altitude where the pilot could clearly make out faces on the deck. Lehner held his fire until he was 1,200 yards from the Shiryuki, then squeezed the trigger. Instantly, 8 streams of .50 caliber death shot toward the destroyer, tracers forming solid lines of light, connecting aircraft and ship. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Hundreds of armor-piercing incendiary rounds tore into the bridge and superstructure at 2,910 feet per second. Bridge windows shattered in showers of glass, cutting down anyone nearby. The thin gun shields offered no protection. The rounds pierced steel like paper. Within seconds, the destroyer's anti-aircraft guns fell silent, their crews obliterated by the concentrated fire. Takashi Mieta, one of the few survivors from the Shiriki's bridge, later described it as being caught in a giant metal cutting saw, watching his captain and most of the bridge crew struck down in seconds by rounds that sparked and flashed as they ripped through the steel bulkheads. Lehner held his firing run for 8 seconds, unleashing more than 900 rounds into Shiryuki before releasing 2 500-pound bombs that skipped across the water like stones, smashing into the destroyer's hull just below the waterline. Fitted with 5-second delay fuses, the bombs penetrated the hull before detonating, snapping the ship's back and tearing massive holes that flooded her engine rooms within minutes. As Lehner pulled up and away, his gunner swept the deck with turret-mounted .50 calibers. Shiryuki was already listing heavily to port, her crew abandoning their guns to battle floods they could not contain. Behind Lehner, 11 more B-25s picked targets within the convoy, their pilots astonished by the paralysis of the Japanese ships under this unprecedented assault. Lieutenant John Hennebree, flying hag, focused on the transport Kakushi Maru, walking 8-gun bursts from bow to stern, tracers punching through bridge, demolishing forward cargo handling equipment, and silencing anti-aircraft positions before skip bombs tore into her hull. The transport's captain tried to maneuver away, but the helm was unresponsive. The helmsman and most of the bridge crew had been cut down by .50 caliber fire, the bridge reduced to a chaotic scene of shattered metal and bodies. Adding to the carnage, the boomerang fighters swept in, their 4 20mm cannons and 6.303 machine guns targeting anti-aircraft positions and bridge crews, suppressing any attempt at organized defense. Flight Sergeant Fred Cassidy, flying a No. 30 Squadron boomerang, dove toward the transport Teal Maru at 500 feet, descending to mast height in the final seconds, tearing into the superstructure with his cannons. Cassidy would later recall the bridge seemingly disintegrating under the impact of 20mm explosive rounds, sailors thrown into the air by the blast, and lifeboats shattered as rounds struck them. Skip bombing proved equally devastating. Bomb after bomb bounced across the water, striking Japanese hulls at the waterline, with delayed action fuses ensuring penetration before detonation. The transport Nojima took 3 hits in rapid succession, her hull splitting like an opener, flooding compartments packed with soldiers in full combat gear. They had no chance to escape the rapidly rising water, and survivors recalled hearing screams over the roar of engines and exploding ammunition. Commander Yasumi Doi aboard Tokatake watched in horror as his trained gun crews were cut down by streams of .50 caliber fire, bodies torn apart by the heavy rounds. He attempted to organize a defense, shouting orders to redirect fire at the low-flying attackers, but gunners were killed faster than they could respond, and the few survivors were too terrified to man their posts as B-25s approached, noses flashing with muzzle fire. The Japanese Navy had never trained for such an attack, never imagined medium bombers transformed into flying battleships bristling with forward-firing guns, never developed tactics for combined strafing and skip bombing at wave-top altitude. The destroyer Horatio attempted to shield the transports, maneuvering between the attackers and the convoy. Her captain's heroic effort only drew concentrated fire. 3 B-25s focused on Horatio, their 24 guns unleashing over 2,000 rounds per minute, shredding the superstructure, killing the bridge crew, destroying fire control systems, and jamming her rudder hard to starboard. Out of control, Horatio collided with the transport Nojima. The vessels locked together as fire spread between them, crews unable to fight the flames or separate the ships. Admiral Kimura, watching from his flagship as the convoy disintegrated, struggled to comprehend the attack. This was unlike anything in Japanese naval doctrine. The Americans ignored conventional patterns. No torpedo runs to avoid, no high-altitude bombs that could be dodged. Only a relentless barrage of automatic fire, transforming ships into slaughterhouses. Orders for evasive maneuvers came too late. The B-25s were too fast. too numerous, appearing from every direction with 8-gun noses spitting death at any ship trying to maintain formation. The transport Oya Maru became a particular target when her captain turned to present a broadside, giving the B-25s a perfect angle. Lieutenant Donald McCullough, in Sleepy Time Gal, opened fire from 1,500 yards, his 8-gun sending streams of armor-piercing, incendiary rounds into the hull at the waterline. Fires erupted in the cargo holds, where ammunition and fuel ignited, creating secondary explosions that tore out sections of the hull. Skip bombs finished the destruction, breaking Oya Maru in half. The ship sank so quickly that most of her 1,500 embarked soldiers had no chance to escape. In just 15 minutes, the carefully organized convoy was reduced to a chaotic scene of burning, sinking wrecks. The destroyer Asagumo, attempting to rescue survivors from the water, became a target itself. 2 B-25s swept her decks clear of personnel with relentless machine gun fire, before skip bombs tore holes in her hull below the waterline. Japanese sailors, believing themselves safe once in the sea, watched in terror as B-25 strafed lifeboats and swimmers, pilots following strict orders to prevent any reinforcements from reaching New Guinea. By 10:15 a.m., as the last B-25 disappeared toward the south, Admiral Kimura surveyed the wreckage around him. The Imperial Japanese Navy had just faced a new form of naval warfare that would change the Pacific conflict forever. Of his 8 transports, every one was sinking or already lost, smoke and flames marking their final positions as they slipped beneath the waves, taking with them desperately needed supplies and equipment for La. For the 8 destroyers had been destroyed, including Shiryuki, while the surviving ships were heavily damaged, decks littered with the dead and wounded, superstructures riddled with .50 caliber holes. The human cost was staggering. As the remaining destroyers attempted rescue operations, the sea was filled with bodies and debris, with few living soldiers recovered. Of the 6,900 troops who would sail from Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 would eventually reach La, most rescued by Japanese submarines arriving after dark. The majority of the 51st Division had been obliterated, not in ground combat where they could fight back, nor by conventional naval gunfire, but by modified bombers that transformed their transports into death traps in mere minutes. Captain Tamikihara, one of the few senior officers to survive, later wrote that the attack was unlike anything he had ever seen or imagined, describing the B-25s as cutting their ships in half with concentrated firepower. The psychological blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy far exceeded the material losses. As news of the convoy's destruction spread, officers who had dismissed American bombing as ineffective were forced to confront a stark new reality. The Americans had created a weapon against which traditional naval defenses were powerless. Each B-25's 8-gun nose carried more forward-firing automatic weapons than most destroyers, and unlike ship-mounted guns, these could be directed with the speed and flexibility only aircraft allowed. Naval doctrine, built on surface engagements and conventional aerial attacks, offered no strategy against flying gunships capable of obliterating a convoy in minutes. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, received the report of the Bismarck Sea disaster visibly shaken. He immediately understood that Japan could no longer risk surface vessels within the range of American aircraft. The Navy's inability to protect even a heavily escorted convoy meant that reinforcement and resupply of forward positions would become nearly impossible, dooming garrisons across the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. Yamamoto ordered a review of convoy procedures and anti-aircraft defenses, but privately acknowledged to his staff that there might be no effective counter to the American strafers. The transformation of the B-25 Mitchell from a conventional medium bomber into a strafing gunship represented American ingenuity at its finest, born of practical necessity rather than pre-war doctrine. Gunn, working with limited resources under primitive conditions, created a weapon more effective against shipping than purpose-built attack aircraft, demonstrating remarkable American adaptability. The 8-gun nose modification became standard on late production B-25J models, with North American Aviation integrating field modifications into factory production, producing aircraft carrying up to 18 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns. Following the Bismarck Sea victory, B-25 strafers spread throughout the Southwest Pacific, appearing wherever Japanese shipping attempted operations. The 345th Bombardment Group, known as the Apaches, received B-25 strafers in August 1943 and immediately began targeting coastal traffic around New Guinea, aircraft marked with distinctive shark mouths that became synonymous with death to Japanese sailors. The 38th Bombardment Group converted to strafers as well, developing new tactics for attacking harbors and anchorages, including night operations using radar to locate targets in complete darkness. By late 1943, Japanese officers reported that daylight movement of any ship larger than a fishing vessel had become suicidal within B-25 range. The impact on Japanese logistics was catastrophic. The Navy increasingly relied on submarines and fast destroyers running at night to supply forward garrisons, methods that could deliver only a fraction of what surface convoys carried. Japanese forces across the Pacific began suffering severe shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The garrison at La, meant to be reinforced by the March 3rd convoy, never received adequate provisions and was eventually evacuated in September 1943. Soldiers forced a march through jungle and mountains with massive casualties from starvation and disease. Attempt to counter the B-25 strafers proved largely ineffective. Their speed and concentrated firepower made them difficult targets, and low-altitude attacks neutralized heavy anti-aircraft guns. The Japanese experimented with desperate measures, including suicide ramming attacks by fighters, but nothing could halt the relentless attrition of shipping. By mid-1944, the Japanese merchant fleet had lost over 60% of its tonnage, much of it destroyed by B-25 strafers and skip bombing attacks that turned cargo ships and transports into blazing wrecks within minutes. Throughout 1944, the B-25 strafers continued their lethal operations, expanding their targets to include Japanese airfields, where the 8-gun noses proved equally deadly against aircraft on the ground. The August 17 to 21st, 1943 raids on WWII showcased this versatility, as B-25 strafers destroyed over 170 Japanese planes in a series of low-level attacks, leaving the 4th Air Army virtually powerless. Japanese pilots would later recount the terror of seeing B-25 sweep in at treetop level, nose guns tearing through carefully dispersed aircraft, reducing them to burning wreckage before bombs finished the job. During the Battle of Biak in June 1944, B-25 strafers again demonstrated their power against Japanese naval forces attempting to reinforce the island. On June 8th, 10 B-25s of the 17th Reconnaissance Squadron attacked a Japanese destroyer flotilla, their 8-gun noses riddling the destroyer Harrison with armor-piercing incendiary fire before skip bombs sent her to the bottom. This strike forced the Japanese to abandon the reinforcement effort, leaving the Biak garrison isolated. A clear example of how B-25 strafers could shape entire campaigns by denying the enemy freedom of movement at sea. The crews flying these modified B-25 developed their own culture and traditions, decorating their aircraft with elaborate nose art and giving them names like Dirty Dora, Pluto, and Hell's Angel, reflecting their aggressive purpose. They understood they were operating a unique weapon, an aircraft combining the range and payload of a medium bomber with firepower surpassing most fighters. Pride came from knowing that each sunken Japanese ship meant fewer supplies and reinforcements reaching enemy garrisons. Survivors of these attacks carried lasting psychological scars. Lieutenant Hiroshi Yamamoto, from the transport Kikuchi Maru, described recurring nightmares of the 8 eyes of death on B-25s, while Commander Toshio Abe, witnessing the Bismarck Sea massacre from a rescue destroyer, reported that his crew froze in fear at the sound of aircraft engines, knowing the strafers could appear at any moment. The impact of the B-25 strafers forced a fundamental shift in Japanese strategic planning. Commanders had to assume that any daylight movement could be detected and attacked. Operations that had been routine in 1942 became impossible by late 1943. compelling the Japanese to adopt desperate measures to maintain their scattered garrisons. The famed Tokyo Express destroyer runs the Guadalcanal exemplified this adaptation, relying on speed and darkness to avoid air attack. But even these missions suffered losses once B-25 strafers equipped with radar began night hunting. By early 1944, Japanese officers were describing the B-25 strafers as the most feared weapon in the Pacific, more devastating than submarines, more accurate than dive bombers, more flexible than torpedo planes. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, Chief of Staff of the Combined Fleet, admitted in a classified report that the Navy had no effective defense against mass strafing attacks, recommending that surface vessels avoid operating within 500 miles of American air bases. This effectively ceded vast areas of the Pacific to American control, as B-25s based forward could cover enormous swathes of ocean. The contribution of the Royal Australian Air Force was notable. Australian crews flew alongside Americans throughout the campaign, with number 18 Squadron RAF operating B-25 strafers from 1944 onward. Their aircraft bore RAF roundels but retained the same devastating 8-gun nose configuration. Australian pilots proved particularly aggressive against Japanese coastal shipping in the Netherlands East Indies, using intimate knowledge of local waters to find target American crews might overlook. Technical evolution of the B-25 strafer continued throughout the war. Later modifications included rocket launchers, improved gun sights, and even experimental 75mm cannons for larger vessels. The B-25J-22, the ultimate strafer variant, combined 8 nose guns, fuselage package guns, top turret guns, waist guns, and tail guns, totaling 18.50 caliber weapons capable of delivering devastating fire from multiple angles. These late-war variants function as flying arsenals, able to destroy entire convoys single-handedly. German and Italian military observers, learning of American strafer tactics through intelligence reports, marveled at the concept of converting medium bombers into flying gunships. The Luftwaffe attempted similar modifications on the Junkers Ju-88, fitting forward-firing cannons for anti-shipping operations, but never achieved the concentrated firepower of the B-25's 8-gun nose. Italian forces experimented with skip bombing using SM.79 torpedo bombers, but lacked the forward firepower to suppress anti-aircraft defenses as effectively as B-25 strafers. The impact of the B-25 strafers extended far beyond immediate battlefield success, influencing post-war aircraft design and military doctrine. The concept of a heavily armed gunship directly inspired aircraft such as the AC-47 Spooky and AC-130 Spectre used in Vietnam and later conflicts. The integration of massive forward firepower into an aircraft originally designed for other purposes became standard American practice, a lineage tracing directly back to Pappy Gunn's innovative modifications in Australia. Japanese military historians writing after the war recognized the B-25 strafer as one of the most important tactical innovations of the Pacific War, comparable in significance to radar or code breaking. Professor Masanori of the Japanese Defense University noted that the strafer not only destroyed Japanese ships, but also shattered Japan's entire concept of naval warfare, forcing the country to abandon offensive operations far earlier than planned. The inability to protect shipping from these attacks accelerated Japan's defeat, preventing the concentration of forces for counteroffensives. Stories of individual B-25 strafer missions became legendary within the squadrons that flew them, passed down from veteran crews to new pilots as examples of what these aircraft could accomplish. The attack on Simpson Harbor at Rabaul on November 2, 1943, illustrates this perfectly. B-25 strafers swept the anchorage at mass height, their guns ripping through dozens of vessels while skip bombs sank the larger ships at their moorings. Japanese witnesses later described the harbor as a cauldron of burning oil and exploding ammunition within 10 minutes, with rescue impossible due to continued strafing of anyone who ventured onto the docks. The process of modifying B-25s into strafers became increasingly sophisticated as mechanics learned the aircraft structure and limits. By late 1943, field modification centers could convert a standard B-25 into a strafer in less than a week, installing 8 nose guns, additional ammunition storage, and reinforced mounting points with practice efficiency. Ammunition feed systems were refined to prevent jamming during violent maneuvers, gun harmonization perfected for optimal range, and trigger mechanisms modified so pilots could fire selected guns or all 8 simultaneously. Skip bombing tactics also evolved. Pilots discovered that approaching at a slight angle rather than head-on made it harder for anti-aircraft gunners to track them while still delivering bombs accurately. They found that releasing bombs at roughly 60 feet altitude and 340 yards from the target produced ideal skip patterns, bouncing once or twice before striking the waterline. Delay fuses were adjusted according to the type of target. 4 seconds for thin-skinned transports, 6 seconds for armored warships. The Japanese Navy attempted to counter the strafer threat with desperate measures, mounting additional light anti-aircraft guns wherever possible, performing radical evasive maneuvers, even stopping or reversing suddenly. These proved largely ineffective. The B-25's speed and maneuverability allowed pilots to adjust aim instantly. Radar-directed anti-aircraft guns offered marginal improvement, but by the time they were deployed, American air superiority was overwhelming, and attacks often involved large numbers of aircraft. The maintenance crews keeping B-25 strafers operational were equally critical. The 8-nose guns required constant attention to prevent corrosion in the humid Pacific environment. Ammunition feeds needed cleaning and adjustment after every mission, and the stress of low-level operations caused accelerated wear on engines and airframes. Crew chiefs worked through tropical nights to prepare aircraft for dawn missions, fully aware that mechanical failure during a low-level attack almost certainly meant death for the aircrew. Intelligence networks supporting strafing missions were vital. Coast watchers, submarine patrols, and code-breaking operations provided timely information on Japanese ship movements, often only hours before a mission, allowing B-25 crews to strike targets at their most vulnerable moments. The aircraft's range and firepower meant that no Japanese vessel could feel safe anywhere within 500 miles of an American airfield. The human cost for American crews was significant. Low-level attacks against offended targets resulted in heavy casualties. The 3rd Attack Group alone lost over 40 B-25s during the war, mostly shot down while performing strafing runs and exposed to ground fire. The psychological strain of flying directly at enemy guns, maintaining steady flight under fire, and pulling up at the last moment to avoid collisions took severe toll. Many veteran pilots developed nervous conditions, forcing their removal from combat after too many missions, having watched tracer rounds reach for their aircraft time and again. The B-25 strafer's success influenced American tactical doctrine across the military, proving that innovative field modifications could sometimes surpass purpose-built weapons. Commanders like General Kenny, willing to support unconventional solutions that defied established doctrine, were crucial to American success in the Pacific. The Strafer program demonstrated how giving creative individuals like Pappy Gunn the freedom and resources to experiment could produce revolutionary results that transformed warfare. Japanese survivors of Strafer attacks often recount the terrifying impersonal nature of the weapon. The 8-gun nose turned killing into a mechanical process. Unlike dive bombing or torpedo attacks, where individual skill mattered, the B-25 Strafer simply pointed at its target and unleashed a relentless stream of destruction. One Japanese officer described it as facing a flying machine gun nest, impossible to suppress, impossible to escape, arriving without warning to turn ships into charred wrecks in seconds. The final evolution of B-25 Strafer tactics came in 1945 as crews prepared for the invasion of Japan, developing techniques for striking suicide boats, coastal defenses, and industrial targets, solidifying the aircraft's role as one of the most versatile and devastating weapons of the Pacific War. The 8-gun nose of the B-25 proved equally devastating against land targets, tearing railroad locomotives to scrap, obliterating radar installations, and suppressing anti-aircraft positions during larger raids. Plans existed for massive strafer sweeps across Japanese harbors and anchorages, intended to destroy what remained of the Imperial Navy before invasion forces arrived. Japan's surrender ultimately rendered these operations unnecessary, but a legacy of the B-25 strafer endures in modern military aviation, where the concept of heavily armed ground attack aircraft remains central to tactical doctrine. The A-10 Thunderbolt II Warthog, with its massive 30mm cannon, can be seen as a direct descendant of the B-25 strafer, designed to destroy ground targets with overwhelming firepower at close range. The success of gunship aircraft in conflict from Vietnam to Afghanistan can be traced directly back to the workshops in Australia, where Pappy Gunn first installed 8 machine guns in a bomber's nose. Decades after the war, veterans of B-25 strafer units still gather, sharing memories of missions that seemed suicidal at the time but proved devastatingly effective. They recall the smell of cordite filling the cockpit as 8 guns fired in unison, the violent vibrations shaking the entire aircraft, and the sight of Japanese ships disintegrating under their fire. These men knew they had flown something unique in the history of aerial warfare, an improvised weapon that outperformed any purpose-built aircraft, a testament to American ingenuity and adaptability. Post-war Japanese analyses recognized the B-25 strafer as one of 3 innovations that contributed decisively to the collapse of their empire, alongside radar and code breaking. The inability to protect shipping from strafer attacks meant that Japan's island garrisons withered from lack of supplies, and reinforcements never arrived. Admiral Somu Toyoda, the last commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, summarized it succinctly: "The 8-gun B-25 destroyed our ability to move by sea, a capability no island nation could afford to lose." The technical specifications of the B-25 strafer became legendary among aviation enthusiasts. Each .50 caliber machine gun weighed 64 pounds, fired 850 rounds per minute, and required elaborate ammunition feed systems for continuous fire. Together, the 8 guns added over 500 pounds to the aircraft, not including ammunition, demanding careful weight distribution to maintain balance. Each gun carried 400 rounds, for a total of 3,200, enough for roughly 30 seconds of continuous fire, though pilots rarely exceeded 8 seconds in a single pass. The B-25 strafer was more than a weapon. It embodied the American approach to warfare in World War II: technological innovation, tactical flexibility, and aggressive execution. While other nations might have spent years developing a purpose-built gunship, Americans modified existing bombers in field workshops, tested them in combat, and refined them through experience. The willingness to experiment, to take risks, and to trust the judgment of combat personnel over distant planners proved decisive in Pacific. By the end of the war, B-25 strafer crews were among the most decorated in the Army Air Forces. Their missions had directly contributed to isolating and defeating Japanese forces across the Pacific. Presidential unit citations, distinguished flying crosses, and silver stars recognized the extreme danger and extraordinary effectiveness of their operations, but no award could fully capture the impact of their service. The sight of 8 streams of tracer fire reaching out to destroy enemy ships turned the tide of battle over the Bismarck Sea in a mere 15 minutes. The last B-25 strafer mission of World War II occurred on August 14, 1945, as Japan announced its surrender. Aircraft of the 345th Bombardment Group attacked Japanese shipping in the inland sea, destroying several small vessels attempting to flee to Korea, even with the war's outcome certain. The crews returned to a world where their unique weapon was no longer needed, but the concept they had proven would influence military aviation for generations. Ultimately, the B-25 strafer stands as perhaps the most successful field modification in aviation history, transforming a conventional medium bomber into a ship-killing machine that terrorized the Imperial Japanese Navy. From Pappy Gunn's first experiments at Eagle Farm to the mass-produced B-25J-22 with 18 guns, the program demonstrates how innovation born from necessity can surpass the limits of conventional wisdom. The .50 caliber guns protruding from the B-25's nose became a symbol of American determination and ingenuity, proving that in modern warfare, the side that adapts fastest often wins. The story of Japan's encounter with the B-25 strafer is one of technological surprise and tactical revolution. The proud Imperial Japanese Navy, inheritors of the samurai tradition and victors at Tsushima, found itself helpless against mechanics from Texas and pilots from Kansas, who turned medium bombers into flying battlefields. The 8-gun nose that Admiral Kimura saw approaching his convoy on March 3, 1943, represented more than a weapon. It represented a new kind of warfare, where innovation trumped tradition and a handful of modified aircraft could destroy an empire's ability to sustain itself.